Welcome to the playoff edition, first round of our football video previews. I'm Gaston Gazette sports editor, joined by Richard Walker, Philip Gardner. We're going to go over a few of the storylines here for the first round of the state playoffs, which kick off on Friday night. First of all, Phil, Forest View gets a number 2 seed at 9-2, playing a 5-6 Weddington team. What do they need to do to not necessarily look ahead to that next round, which will feature a county matchup?
I'll tell you what, a lot of people are looking ahead to next week when Forest View play either Ashbrook or South Point. Either of those games will be huge, but I guarantee you Forest View is not looking ahead, and the reason for that is 0-8. They've never won a playoff game in school history, and they want to make sure to finally do that this year. I think it could be tough. Weddington's a 15 seed. They've got a quarterback who's going to Duke. I understand they've got a really big offensive lineman, and this team could give them some fits, so Forest View's got to be on top of his game, I believe, this week.
And another obvious storyline in the county, Bessemer City dropping down from the 2A ranks to the 1AA rank. Obviously brings a good team to the table, Bessemer City does this year. Richard, talk about them in a lower bracket and what their chances are.
Well, you know, my feeling on them all year long has been that they might not so subtly have the best playoff opportunities of our teams, because looking at their schedule, they played Huss non-conference, some other good non-conference teams. They play in a 1A, 2A league with East Lincoln and Lincoln, who have been state championship runner-up and state champion the last 2 years. So I felt all year long that they're not going to see anybody in the playoffs that are better than what they've already seen. Now, that being said, they still have to play the games and play well, and there are some state powers that are lurking in their bracket, Albemarle being one of them, Swain County being one of them, Monroe being one of them, and the number 3 seed in that bracket, Hendersonville. But that being said, you know, even Albemarle and Monroe, who are unbeaten, that, you know, you'd have a hard time convincing me that those teams are better than what they've seen in, say, East Lincoln, Lincoln, Hunter Huss this year. So, you know, Bessemer City plays as Bessemer City can play. I think there's a chance that they can go even as far as a state championship game, and certainly that'll be a challenge, because there's the way the bracket plays, they might be in a situation where they have to beat back-to-back unbeaten teams in Albemarle and Monroe to do it. But, you know, I like it. I like Bessemer City's chances, and I think they're playing really well this time of the year. Certainly a heartbreaking loss to Lincoln last week, but certainly no shame in that, given that Lincoln and Bessemer City, that was one of those games we talked about last week, that, you know, mistakes, the team that made the least amount of mistakes would win that game. A defensive struggle, I believe it was a 13-6. So I think Bessemer City's got a good shot as they move forward, but it's going to be, you know, consistent play on offense. I think the defense is fine for them if they keep playing the way they've been playing.
And finally, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention South Point and Ashbrook, 2 county rivals battling in the state playoffs. Obviously a unique situation that they drew each other. Phil, talk about that one. I mean, you know, it kind of goes without saying that it'll be a big game and a big crowd and all that.
I think it's awesome that we had this matchup. I was worried that when the preliminary brackets came out that it wouldn't hold up, and, you know, we'd be looking forward to an Ashbrook South Point game, but then it changed and then they didn't end up playing each other. But I think it's great for the county. This game was 34-0 earlier in the season. But I just think it's funny how both coaches said, well, it was not lopsided. Coach Briggs at Ashbrook said this was not a lopsided game. There's a hook and lateral play that South Point scored on right before halftime that kind of broke their backs, gave them a 20-0 lead at halftime. The coach Devine at South Point, of course, he said it was not a lopsided game either. He thinks Ashbrook's got some of the best athletes in the county, and obviously Ashbrook is playing very well when it matters. They beat Forest View, then after the bye week they beat Hunter Huss. Got some great athletes on defense, and I think they give South Point some trouble this time. I look for it to be a lot closer, but in the end, I think South Point still has to be favored.
And Richard, what's your take on that matchup?
Well, it's interesting because we're 3 years removed from a very similar type matchup. I remember when East Gaston had their 11-win team, they played Ashbrook in the first round that year when they had Patrick Hall, who's now doing really well at Gardner-Webb, and a lot of the same stuff was talked out there. In that game, Patrick Hall was unable to play. He had a hurt ankle, I guess, in the last game against Hunter Huss. Ashbrook, to me, is trending in a different direction this time. I mean, you know, we talked, I guess, 3 weeks ago about would they even make the playoffs, and they closed the regular season by beating Forest View and Huss. Certainly big rivalry games, but like you say, I mean, Coach Devine's echoing the sentiments of a lot of people around. Ashbrook does have tremendous talent. They've had issues with offensive inconsistency, and it looks like they've got those straightened out the last couple of weeks, or the last couple of games certainly, because their defensive talent and personnel, as good as there is around, but I've also seen South Point. I saw South Point really dismantle Crest last week. I think that, as good as Ashbrook may be playing, it's hard for me to imagine the Red Raider machine not rolling on. But the flip side of that is they're already talking Forest View and Belmont. You still got to win the game against Ashbrook, and Ashbrook comes in playing as hot as anybody around. So, it would be great for our area if it's two straight. Well, either way, if Forest View wins, it's going to be 2 straight weeks of county rivalries, which is good for high school football in the area.
That'll wrap it up for the first round of the playoffs, and we'll see you back for week 2.